Hey guys, today we're going to be taking a look at the Executioner and her way of life. Now, what's funny about how I found this is I didn't actually find it on any anime review boards or any recommendations. I actually found this because one of my favorite artists, Millie, actually made the opening theme for it. And I remember when I watched the opening, I actually became rather interested because it just looks kind of goofy. Like, this random girl is stabbing with weird motions, and there's knives flying across the screen, and then this pink-haired chick is just kind of flying across the screen for a little bit. Then there's this girl who's trying to take her head off. And overall, I just got really interested in it, so I decided to check it out. What was actually pretty interesting about episode 1 is how it really does hook you into the anime. The anime isn't about a normal, isekai main character comes in with some power. It's about the executioner of those isekai main characters. These main characters, their powers go out of control when they use it too much, so they need executioners to kind of keep them at bay and just to kill them before they cause any trouble. And I thought that was actually a really cool premise. The first episode itself, it was creepy, it had a great atmosphere, it was a little gory, it had a pretty decent fight scene. And I actually did begin to like the character, Meno, because she has to deal with the fact that she's meeting all of these people and befriending them, gaining their trust just to execute them by the end of the day. It's dark and it's gritty, and I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. On the topic of characters, there was 4 main characters. You have Meno, who's the cold, ruthless executioner who goes after the problematic lost ones who have the potential to destroy the world. You have Akari, who is the lost one who Meno actually failed to kill because of her pure concept, which, by the way, pure concepts are kind of the powers that these lost ones are brought into the world with. Then you have Momo, who is the aide of Meno, who kind of helps her out with a bunch of the tasks that Meno has to perform. And then you have the princess of the land that they were in for about 2 episodes. The princess is cool, I guess. She goes around righting wrongs, and she kind of just appears in 10 out of the 12 episodes. I didn't really mind her too much, but it was kind of wacky that she did, literally comes out of the shadows in basically all these episodes, and it's kind of like a quote-unquote a coincidence that she's always in the same place with Meno and Momo at the same time. But yeah, overall, I didn't really have too many issues with the characters. The only problem is that Akari is really, really annoying. She's this bubbly, dumb, airheaded girl who kind of goes around making weird poses and just screaming and yelling a bunch. She's also obsessed with Meno, just like Momo is. I really did want to see more of all the characters, why those two are so obsessed with Meno, especially Momo. And that's where my first issue with the story kind of arises, that none of the characters really have time to develop. It's not much screen time has been given to all the characters to kind of give the backstories. The most criminal example of this is Momo. She has 10 seconds of backstory with it was just Meno giving her some hair ties. And then after that, she's now all over Meno, rubbing her thighs and stuff, trying to get her Momo energy or whatever. I want to see more from these characters. You have another example of this with the princess. She goes around righting wrongs, talking all this stuff about justice, but we don't know why she wants to do all that. It's not like she was exiled from the castle. In fact, she actually started out wanting, I guess, sort of a revenge for her father, but because her father was kind of exposed by Meno in the beginning of the story. But that whole plotline kind of just died off because I guess the princess was fond of Momo and Meno. And I wish more screen time was devoted to giving these characters actual depth to them, more personality. Because all we have right now is there was just Momo, who is literally this obsessive, screaming type person who just wants to see Meno dress up and stuff. Then you have Akari, who is the most criminally dumb 10-year-old bubbly girl, making these weird poses, going around trying unfamiliar stuff. Then you have this princess who's just kind of boring, and who just appears out of nowhere for parking meetings. The pacing of the anime is by no means bad, it's just kind of inconsistent. For the first, let's say, 1 to 5 episodes, the anime goes by in a pretty good pace. You have time devoted to help developing Momo, I guess. You have I use the word funny lightly, but you have their funny interactions. You have their interesting reactions, I would say. You have interesting reactions between all the characters. You're kind of discovering the world along, discovering how their magic kind of comes along, how they use their magic. And it's just a nice introduction to a pretty well thought out world. The people of this new world don't just speak Japanese out of the convenience for the audience, but since the Japanese have been coming to the world for so long, their culture has kind of been ingrained in these people. They have cars, they have guns, but it's all kind of mixed in with their own cultures, and I thought that was a really good idea. But the real issue with pacing really starts to come in at episode 6. Like, I'm not really sure what they were thinking with episode 6, making it go by so fast, but in the first like 14 minutes, so much stuff happens. And then there's the scene where they're fighting the Archbishop, right? And then they're trying to develop Akari and Momo at the same time, their relationship, and then they're also trying to like flesh out the villain, quote unquote, because they really didn't do much for the Archbishop in general. They try and do all that, but that was all within like 2 minutes. And then the episode ends with Momo and then the princess fighting their own separate battles, and then Momo goes on like a berserk rage after her ribbons were kind of destroyed, which, by the way, I still want to know why Momo is still so obsessed with Menno and why those ribbons are so important to her. We know, like, I guess sort of why it's important to her, but we just don't get that real, like, human connection between them. In fact, in general, none of the characters really have that many human connections. And that's probably where one of my biggest issues with the anime lies. The characters aren't really that human. They don't feel like there. It's not like they're vomiting exposition or just saying random nonsense. It's just none of the conversation. It's just, I can't imagine people like that. It's like someone like someone like Menno. Even if she's faking having to like Akari because she has to kill her, I just can't imagine like some of these conversations happening. I think that's just probably the fault of Akari being such an annoying and weak character at this point in the story. After episode 6 is probably one of the most embarrassing and insulting feats of animation I've seen in anime in the past like 2 years. Like, the entirety of episode 8 is just reused scenes from that exact episode. It starts off with Menno getting out of bed, and then Akari doing whatever bubble airhead girl she did, and then it kind of goes into some scenes with Momo and the princess having a beer together. But all that stuff was reused for like the last 16 minutes, and it even goes into other scenes. It's just it's just really not good, lazy work. I can't say it's bad because it's not like I can insult the animation, because maybe it just wasn't a good day at the studio. Maybe they just didn't have much budget, or maybe just in general they just weren't feeling it that day. But the point is, you could literally take episode 8 and like half of episode 7 out of the anime, and it wouldn't change a thing. It just kind of takes the immersion away from the experience. Like, in general, at this point, the anime has looked pretty good. Of course, there's been some choppy animation here and there, but the actual visuals with like animated effects, I would say, like there's like the particles from the ether when they have to conjure up the magic to use in the fight, like it looks good. And the world around it, when they have like panned out pictures of it, or maybe even just Akari and Momo standing still or just standing in town. It's lively, and the CG isn't noticeable at this point. And it was good, I liked it. But I really just don't know what happened with episodes 7 and 8. Like, maybe they were just like sort of filler episodes or what, but it really just wasn't good, and it really took me out of the show for a little bit. But at least from this point on, I do have mostly compliments to give this anime, because I did think it actually really increased in quality after the whole like terrible animation-ness of those 2 episodes. The next arc's villain is probably one of my least favorite aspects of this anime, actually. The villain, I just straight up can't remember her name right now, but because she was just so unmemorable. Well, the villain, basically, her entire purpose for being so evil and cruel is the fact that wanted revenge for her mother. And while that didn't really make any sense in some flashbacks that were like 10 seconds, you get to see that Flare, who is Menno's master, actually killed this lady's mom. Which, I mean, in a sense, yeah, of course you want revenge, but I don't understand why her personality was so twisted. They gave a reason for it, but it was like a 5-second part of dialogue that didn't really make any sense. Like, because she was called like worthless and disappointment, she was twisted, her personality was twisted into this really creepy, blood-loving, like torture psycho of a human being. It just didn't make any sense. And why she was driven to become like taboo, again, didn't make any sense because there was just no context. Just in general, like, that's not realistic. Like, who am I to judge like what a person could like become after hearing all that so much? But from the sounds of it, like, it really just was like such a lame excuse for a character to be so evil for basically no reason. Though I will say, the next villain that comes up like right after her is actually not bad. The fourth human error, the embodiment of chaos, actually was a pretty cool character. I mean, it's this little girl who was taken into this world with such a terrible pure concept, which every time she dies, she's resurrected using her own death as a sacrifice. But since she can only resurrect using a sacrifice, she has to, I guess, use other people, and that kind of wears down on her own mental state until she's only left with just her basic human functions. Like in the beginning, at around episode 7, which again, it's not really that good of an episode, but you could notice that at the end of it, we were introduced to this girl, and she was kind of just out of it. She was spacing out, she was singing randomly, she couldn't speak, she couldn't see, and I mean, that's a good villain premise. Her pure concept was used so much and her mind was eroded to the point where she just couldn't do anything. In fact, I wouldn't even say she was trying to be evil. It's just really she has the mind of a little kid just wanting to watch movies and singing and dancing, but has all this power and going rampant out of control. And like, that's cool. Though no matter how good your villain is, I mean, unfortunately, the entire thing was left off with such an anticlimactic end. The entire final fight hinged on the fact that they couldn't beat this fourth human error because she's just so powerful, and they're only fighting like a pinky finger from the full body, and it's just, everything is just looking bleak. And then Akari comes in with her alternate personality. He's like, hey, Menno, can you use my power? And then he's like, okay, sure. And then they do like some big fire pillar attack that one-shots her and kind of removes all the risk, and everything that's at stake was just erased in the final Deus Ex Machina. I'm not one to bash on having a Deus Ex Machina. Like, in some cases, it can be really hype. But at the same time, you kind of sacrifice the entirety of the anime that was built up. It even shifted focus towards this. So I had hoped like the writing would have improved, which I mean it did, or maybe the fights would improve, which again, it did. But just the actual quality and the emotion found in that fight was little to none, because there was no real backstory to the villain. We just know that she was the daughter of this Otherworlder and the sister of the second to last villain. Like, that's it. There was no emotion in that final fight. Like, I didn't even feel bad for the villain, nor did I feel like, oh yeah, oh man, this villain deserved it. Like, the writing was just zero. The anime ends off with actually 2 cliffhangers, being the main villain actually survived, and she revived her sister, and I was just like, oh yeah, let's make a whole movie on a grander scale, which the whole like reason why the little girl did that is because she wanted to see a movie with like the main character struggling or whatever, and kind of silly, but at the same time, I guess that's just the villain you're dealing with. It's the eroded body, or eroded mind of an 8-year-old. And then the other cliffhanger being that the current actual heir of Flare is going to go after Menno to kill her subordinate for the zillionth time, she said. That was the very last scene, and I was just kind of left off with empty feelings, because again, I didn't really care for any of the characters. Unless you like their personality, like their surface personality, you're not going to care about any of these characters no matter what happens to them. Because there is no backstory to basically any of these, or no real meaningful changes that they go through. And just in general, none of them are really relatable. You have Akari, right? And she just goes around like doing, I guess, things that a child would do. Like, I guess if you find that cute, sure, you may care what she does. But from like a true objective standpoint, like, she is really just like a zero in the whole show until she actually like, like becomes cool for about 3 episodes, and then she just goes back to her nonsense form with yelling and screaming. Momo is completely and utterly obsessed with Menno, and we have no reason as to why. We only have the 10 seconds of backstory between her and Menno, but it just not enough to actually get me to understand. It's like, okay, maybe it makes sense why she's so obsessed. Of course, there's going to be some extreme like exaggerations with personality and character traits, but still, it's such a lame excuse to have such an obsessive character. I guess she's supposed to be quirky or something, but it just doesn't work when we don't have like a sort of a reason for her obsession. The princess straight up doesn't have a personality. Like, I can't place my finger on what she could be. I couldn't even begin to describe what she is. She just comes in, talks to Momo a little bit, and then just leaves, then returns in an episode later. I'm no stranger to watching anime where the characters may not be as relatable, but it really does kill my enjoyment of the show when I can't at least put myself in their shoes, or just see a bit of myself in these characters. But yeah, if I would have to give it anything out of a 10, I would probably give it a 6, just because of the fact that the entire thing just seems like the shell of an actually pretty good anime, but we don't have the meat and the bones of the anime. until season 2. Hopefully season 2 will improve this anime because I am interested. I watched the whole thing from beginning to end pretty consistently. It's not like I dreaded watching the next installment because it would be boring. I did enjoy this anime, but there really should just be more. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like. If you didn't, feel free to give it a dislike. But yeah, I'm gonna go find something better to watch. See y'all in the next one.